Hey, Eli.
Big Kevin, what's up,
Welcome back.
man? Thanks, buddy.
Missed you
Thanks.
last week.
I missed you too, man. I miss talking about AI with you as opposed to then trying to catch up with it a week later and being inundated with so much news that I don't even know where to start. Like, it's, I had this ambitious project of, speaking of news, just all the advancements with OpenAI's offering. Just on paper, it felt like I was going to have to kind of uproot my whole anthropic existence and move over there just because of not only some specific utility I felt like I was missing, but also just what I could get for my money. I'm in the middle of starting a new business. And so of course, you want to be fiscally responsible and squeeze the most out of what you can. I think it's going to be some really interesting stuff to talk about here as far as the choices to make around that. And I never had a chance to do it. So it's still on my list. So I do want to talk about that. Just some of the changes that have come up. It's been absolutely crazy, like absolutely crazy.
So, I think you bring up an interesting point, which is committing to one platform versus another, and then we're in this sort of interesting adolescence period right now, where you can be Gemini curious, or you can be Claude curious, or you can be GPT curious. But at some point, I think that all of the features and frankly, probably the costing is going to converge such that it's not necessarily going to matter very much. But what's your feeling about committing to one platform versus another? What would tilt you over in a way that you're going to commit? Because I do suspect
Yeah.
that the business models are going to have people, there's a lot of lock-in in it as far as models and memory and context and whatever. And right now we have some fluidity where you can move back and forth and kind of bring your own identity with you. But that might not be the case in another 6 months or 12 months. And it's obvious that all of the platforms know that and are
Yeah.
quadrupling down on who can acquire the most customers now.
Yeah. So for me, of course, there's hitting limits, right? Who's the most generous? Like for a long time, I was toggling between Gemini and Claude simply because I'd hit Claude limits and I kept going on more and more expensive plans. And based on the project I was doing, I'd still hit limits, right? And you're just going to get a lot more runway with GPT right now. They're just going to give you a lot more. I was also doing a bunch of deep coding projects where I felt like cloud code was just best in class. Like it really felt like at the beginning of this year, a runaway train. And I have shifted on that as well. I feel like Codex is pretty amazing, right? Then, of course, there's this whole world of agentic workflows. I went completely apeshit with OpenClaw and then peeled that back because it was just breaking all the time. And I was just spending way too much time trying to maintain something. And I've had a bunch of conversations with people since. Like I had a breakfast yesterday with a guy who at his company, everybody has a Mac Mini. The whole company has a Mac Mini with their own agent on it, right, as their assistant that's kind of tied to a unified knowledge base of everything inside of the company, which I'm like, wow, is that really the way to go to buy everybody a Mac Mini and have that as opposed to just one centralized agent that people could use for different things that lives in a Slack chat? So, from there, I went to Claude Cowork and I built a ton of stuff in Claude Cowork. And then I'm, having another machine that's on all the time and stuff still broke all the time. It was so brittle and it just started, begging the question of for the amount of work I'm putting into this, am I really getting the utility out of it that nets positive out of the whole experience? And so with OpenAI, they have just really started to lean into making it more user friendly. It's almost like the opposite tack of Google right now, where everything is very developer facing. They're kind of doubling down on appealing to the normies and trying to make agentic use cases available for people where you don't necessarily have to have it running on your local machine if you don't want, but you could still have these agentic workflows that are living in the cloud. And so for me, with what I'm building right now and a bunch of little apps, like I'm not building big enterprise software or anything like that right now, it just starts to feel like I'm going to get more for my money. And to your point, there's so much in all the different models where it's like, I'm definitely not ready to give up Notebook LM. I use it all the time. It's an amazing tool, right? But because of the image rendering of GPT now. Like, I'm like, oh boy, I feel like what do you call home? And if you're not doing what you're doing, where you have to keep on top of everything, including Copilot, right? Like, you have to keep up on top of everything for people who are actually using it in their business and they have limited bandwidth and they have to train a lot of people who may not be up on this stuff. It really starts to feel like it makes more sense to pick a track and you live through the ups and downs of leapfrog that are going to be inevitable with all these frontier labs.
So I want to react to a couple of different things. One is, even so, I respect what you're saying. I
Yeah.
respect that codecs can be really, really powerful from a coding perspective. I actually really enjoy using the new GPT agents. So for those of you listening who get annoyed with us because we're always talking about Claude Code and Claude Cowork, well, the agents are great in GPT. They connect. They're just easier for, I think, normal users and your staff to be able to like point and click things. Gemini and I sort of I'm not going to even say a love-hate relationship. Like from a productivity perspective,
Oh,
it
we're
just
we're on the
isn't.
rocks. We're on the rocks, buddy. Me
We're
and
on the
Gemini.
rocks.
We're on the rocks.
We're
Like,
on the rocks. I
I've
do
fallen
love
out of
Notebook
love.
LM, and I love video features like VO3.
Yeah,
And Gemini is the only model out there that's truly multimodal, where you can still put a video into it and have it
totally.
to interpret it. And I have use cases where that makes sense. But even just this morning, I was in with a discussion group, actually led by one of our listeners, and he was demoing the Claude Code integrations into Microsoft. And I keep hitting refresh on the Microsoft App Store for the OpenAI add-ins, and lo and behold, in the last, I don't know, few days or a couple weeks, they've dropped the OpenAI add-in into Microsoft Excel.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Excel.
Starting entry point.
And then there's PowerPoint, but they haven't connected the dots in the same
Yeah.
way that Claude has with the handoff between the documents. And, as much as I want to say that most people's use cases are really fancy and they're about automating like all of these processes in their business, there are a lot of people in every sort of desk-based business who are using Excel,
Mhm.
Word, and PowerPoint all day long to process information and hopefully put themselves into it.
I
And
also feel sorry for every single one of them. I just
well,
wanna extend my
perhaps
condolences.
some of them are doing neat things. That's not fair. But Claude is just so far ahead with it that I actually found that I couldn't lean into GPT the way that I was intending to in the last couple of weeks because of that lack of integration.
I know. Let me
And
let me let me ask you a quick question, man. Don't you feel like these integrations, these tool calls, these MCPs are almost in the same mental space right now as Seven Fingers were with image rendering, a couple years ago, where it's like, oh, this is awful. It's never going to be able to actually make hands right. And it's like, oh wow, now I can't tell photos and videos that are synthetic from organic. Don't you feel that it's almost like a race of weeks right now as far as these different tool calls and integrations? Because I feel like we didn't talk for 1 week, and like just coming into that previous episode, Claude had just opened up the Microsoft kimono to let everybody in, right? Not that we're talking about a matter of weeks ago. This just happened, right? So don't you feel like that other shoe is inevitably going to drop for OpenAI as well, and it's just going to have the exact same connectors, maybe within days or weeks.
well, the one of the things that we both always say, and a lot of people in AI say, is that this is the worst it's ever going to be, right? So
Right,
it's
or
just
just
going to,
interject the word "yet" into everything you
and and then
every
the
complaint
other
that
is
you
just,
have, right?
yeah, just wait a minute. And
Yeah,
rolling back the clock to one of us diving deep into OpenClaw and the other of us diving very briefly into OpenClaw, burning about 3 million tokens in, I don't know, 15 minutes and scrambling away. Like there's a wait and see attitude that
got it.
hopefully people listening to us are like learning from our our exposure.
I went back for second helpings as well, and then I left the table again. I went from a virtual private network to my own dedicated machine, back yeah. I think a lot of it, and I think I do wanna touch on this a bit, is the FOMO, right? Of just there's so much out there that no matter what you are using, there's a part of you that feels like it's always missing out on the other part that you're not using.
Well, and then there are edge cases, and I
Yeah.
think if let's just say you're running a staff of, I don't know, 15 people or something like that, you're going to find that choosing one of the three is totally fine as long as people understand its limitations, its strengths, how to use it, how to apply it, etc. But you, as a leader, and probably a couple of sort of hard to predict people on your team, will lean into it in different ways and will be finding new use cases that may necessitate other models. And I think it's a mistake in most smaller organizations to put the kibosh on that, where
Mhm.
like, oh, well, we're an Anthropic organization. We couldn't possibly use Gemini for that. Well, no, Gemini is the solution to it. Don't try and pound your square peg into that round hole. If you need another platform, use the other platform. The costs are still really pretty low for most of
Yeah.
this stuff.
Yeah, they absolutely are. So, is the TLDR that Claude is still your daily driver?
Claude is still my daily driver. In fact, I have to. I feel like I just abuse GPT. That I have GPT open all day long, and GPT. Oh, I mean, we admonish people all the time for using AI like Google. I have a GPT tab up that I basically use like Google, where I just if I have something random that I want an instant answer for, that's what I use GPT for. And there's no reason really why I couldn't be using Claude for it, but for some reason I use GPT for that.
I was doing the same thing with Gemini when I was really token conscious, when I was building a lot of stuff and I was really concerned about hitting limits. If there was anything that didn't require something in the specific workflow that I was currently just pillaging through tokens on, I would go over to Gemini and say, "Hey, really curious about this thing. Can you tell me, give me a little brief on this?" So yeah, I totally get it. I want to circle back really fast and, with your experience with some of the agentic use cases with GPT now and some of the new things that have come out and, definitely we agree image generation best in class right now, blown away by that. When you take the whole Microsoft integration thing off the table, which I know is going to be hard for you. You love your PowerPoint decks. But if we can pry that out of your hands and remove that as a factor, are there things that you're seeing that are gaps right now? If it wasn't for that, where you do listen objectively, there's a better collective offering that OpenAI has right now because it does have image generation, it does have these cloud-based agents. When playing around with that, like for example, we both use a ClickUp tool call. Does that feel just as robust inside that ecosystem? Are there things where you're like, oh gosh, this just isn't really doing it the way that Claude does it? Have you picked up on anything like that, or are you really hung up on the Microsoft integration?
I'm not hung up on the Microsoft integration. we, I, th-
I'm just messing with you. Don't get defensive.
I may have mentioned this. It is very awkward though, because Microsoft is suddenly really good. And I've been a
Yeah.
Google workspace shop for a long time. And now I loathe it. It's so hard to work with it. So increasingly proposals and other documents, they're all ending up in Microsoft. And now I'm
Yeah.
at this like inflection point where me of 2 years from now is just going to totally kick me of now, because now I'm using Claude, I'm using OpenAI, I'm using Gemini, I'm using Microsoft, I'm using Google. Like it's just like this mess. And being able to make sense of it, there's going to have to be a little bit of a comeuppance somewhere. However, with GPT, it's not a matter of stability. I think it's a matter of scale and distribution within teams that where GPT wins. That I'm not having that many stability problems with my Claude Cowork tasks that are running on a schedule and they're doing things, and that's a lot of my daily driver. But the approach that OpenAI has taken to this is so much closer to their custom GPT approach.
Hmm.
It's really accessible to people. So somebody on a team can put together basically a recipe, and that's not really what they call them, but you basically put together a recipe of, ClickUp plus Slack plus this document store, and now you can do these cool things. And
Yeah.
that's really, really easy to share within
And a much more
team of
intuitive
them.
UI for people who aren't used to kind of going deep into a bunch of nested menus to figure things out.
Yep. And
Yeah.
most people's exposure to LLM, I mean, by the numbers, most people's exposure to AI first comes through Google and Google search. And, Google loves to claim it's, trillions of tokens a day or whatever they're burning on that, which is fine. But if somebody's going to sit down in front of an LLM chatbot, it's still better than even odds that it's going to be GPT. So if you're an organization and you feel like you're starting at step one or step two, It's very likely that a significant portion of your staff is already using GPT versus Claude in like their home life. So it
Mhm.
just the design language translates for people, and then they can roll into it professionally. Plus, it's colorful and click, 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 easy.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. I've been talking to so many people about what their tools of choice are, what they're using it for, how they feel about it. Like just tons of people over the last couple of weeks. And one of the things is I do work with a lot of other creatives, people who are doing writing or art, stuff like that. And I feel like for the longest time, in the same way that Anthropic just was a runaway train with coding abilities, everyone would just say, wow, Claude is just such a better writer. You know, I'm now convinced either I've gotten so picky or I've read so much AI generated slop out there or seen so much of it that I feel like I can just pick apart any sentence written by AI and I don't care what the model is. And so I don't feel like there's anything that right out of the gates it's going to generate as far as writing that doesn't need editing if you want it to feel even close to being human, right? And I had one friend who does a ton of output with writing say that he ran a bunch of outputs through different platforms that would test to try to pick up on, is this AI or not AI? Does this sound like a human? And that GPT actually came out way ahead than Claude on that as well. And I'm wondering, like, I know probably most of the writing that you do, Kevin, is going to be email, right? Or these, these summary drafts or outlines or things like that, or even curriculum. Have you gone back to GPT in a while and just kind of assessed like what creative output looks like? And when I say creative, I mean, listen, a PRD isn't really creative, but does it just unequivocally sound like AI versus something that could have been written by a human, even if that human's an engineer?
It's funny you say that. One of our SaaS products is called LeadWorks, and it creates these dynamic lead magnets, and it's expensive to run. It's expensive on a variable basis, and it runs on Claude Opus because we want to have the best results possible coming out the other end.
Right.
But now that it's getting some usage, it's really starting to add up. So
Yeah. Yeah. How much money am I going to spend for the customer I get?
yes, exactly. And it is just a different dimension, right? Like, so the
Yeah.
conversation becomes about the outputs as opposed to just some like arbitrary fast SaaS fee, whatever it might be.
Right. You're like, I need to turn my ads off. I'm like, why are your conversions too low? No, they're too high, and we're losing money.
I'm
we're,
losing money.
we're getting too many
Exactly.
customers. Yeah.
I'll make it up on volume though. I'm losing
I'm
a
gonna
nickel per run.
need to reduce our user acquisition by 30% so I can keep this thing running.
But in any case, it's a real question, and doing the model jujitsu and trying to figure out what the best model is for what application does take a level of design sophistication that a lot of people aren't looking to. But it also has some differences as far as the prompt structure. So it's one thing to stay within the Claude family. So our app uses the Claude family of models, but it uses Haiku, it uses Sonnet, and it uses Opus, but we have to make sure that as much as possible is in Haiku or Sonnet. But in that conversation is also, do we re-architecture it? And it would be re-architecturing it such that we can also put in OpenAI. And my weekend side quest was adding OpenAI architecture to LeadWorks specifically because I want the image capabilities. But now that I've already done the connective tissue, now it opens the door to should I test it, like A/B test it versus Sonnet versus OpenAI? And the answer is yes. And I'll get there in the next few weeks somewhere.
Right. Because all this stuff takes a lot of time.
Takes a lot more time
Takes
than people think.
takes a lot of time. Yeah. Speaking of a lot of time, of course you did my favorite thing, which is like drop some topics into a chat, hour before recording, right? And then I'm thinking about them as I'm driving my kids to school. I'm like, huh, these are good points, and I don't have nearly enough time to unpack all of them. But you'd asked this question of how to identify what to solve with AI, right? And I think it just plays really well into all these conversations I've been having with people, and lots of different industries and technical capabilities, both personal and professional use cases. From like mortgage brokers to doctors to coaches to everybody, including people who've had AI at the center of what they're doing, like you, right? Where you're helping implement this into other people's organizations and lives. And, you know, I, it's funny because some people I haven't circled back with in like, let's call it 6 months or so. that I caught up with, they're all deep in it, right? Like every place that they're working, they're trying to figure this out. A lot of them are trying to start with something, but a lot of these people also have really just let it flood into their personal lives as well. Like they're using it as much or kind of in the same cadence as maybe they would have used Google a year ago, where I have a question or I have something I need to solve. I need to find a resource. I need to do some research. I need to do something. Google was kind of this entry point, right? It was a tunnel you drive through, and when you come out the other side, you have something to work with. But in this case, you actually have tangible assets. You have all these artifacts that you're starting with instead of just a bunch of blue links. So, anyways, in doing that, one thing really stood out to me as I spoke to more people in your camp, Kevin. And I'm not going to pretend like this is statistically significant or anything, but let's call it half a dozen people that I spoke to where AI isn't just a tool that they're trying to untangle and figure out how to implement in their jobs, but it's a center of what they're doing. Them personally, or maybe their company has decided we are going to be an AI first company right now and we're going to run at this. And the thing that I found that they all had in common is that every single one of them was feeling burned out. They had a super high level of anxiety. They had all this FOMO. They couldn't keep up. And I would say they were just generally unhappy. And I have a couple of theories as to why that might be. But, as you're in the middle of this world as well, I wonder what your reaction is to that.
That was a bit of a divergence from what to solve. You've leapt right to the ramifications of solving too many things, which
Too
is
many things. Well, I think, listen, we're both big advocates of not replacing the human, but augmenting the human and like getting the human to do things that is in their realm of superpowers, right? AI becomes this force multiplier for them. It's not to replace them. So at the center of this is humans. And at the center of humans is their emotional state, how they feel, how they show up every day to work. And for the people the deepest in this, I'm seeing a disproportionate amount of them starting to crumble a bit on the inside. Like I really am.
the cognitive load is real, and you'll
Yeah.
hear everybody who's on the deep end of the pool talk about this. That in a given day, when you look back at the amount that you've accomplished, and thank you very much to Claude or GPT chief of staff type agents. Now I know what I accomplish every day. That my agent crawls my email, it looks at my Slack, it looks at even at my text messages, it figures out all of the things I did, and it's
Right.
like
You have
you.
metrics for where you're lacking now
Well, I
daily.
I, I haven't gone that far.
Didn't you have an agent that would like just like really speak cruelly to you and like call
I
you a slacker?
did. I did. I had my really mean taskmaster.
How was that for your mental health? Did that
It
make you
was
feel good?
terrible. It was terrible, especially when it went off the rails, and it was like, "It's been 14 days. Radio silence."
You piece of shit, Kevin. What are you doing with your life? Why are you even running me? Why are you paying for tokens?
It's just a waste. So the knowing that density, and like anecdotally, it's really easy. Like these are the things that I accomplished yesterday. And you think about, just roll back the clock a few years and how long it would have taken you to accomplish those same things. It would be wild. It's like
Yeah.
weeks worth of work. And as an organizational leader, the cognitive load and the decision making, it's a little bit alleviated because there's not a lot of like team collaboration and such, but you're just making so many decisions in so many different directions. And at least in my case, I'm multitasking in wildly different directions because of just sort of the timelines that are involved. If you're going to kick off, one thing, it's running, and it's rare that my days are so linear that I have the pleasure of then kicking off something that's related to that other thing. So as a result, it can't be healthy. In fact, I know it's not healthy, that I'm constantly switching context between different tasks, and
Right.
that increases load. So yes, I'm accomplishing 80 times, 100 times as much in a given day, but I'm just exhausted by the end.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what a lot of people are reporting. It's just this, they call it AI work density, where you think you are being more productive and saving time, but because of that context switching and because of the number of things that you're doing in parallel even, or even the expectations of what you're now supposed to be outputting because you're token maxing or you're, you've been giving this allotment or this license. And now leadership wants to see all of this output from it. People are starting to get cooked. I was kind of thinking back, like when we had other technologies come online, they would really go directly in opposition to how humans were wired. And then we had to then compensate for that, right? So when you think of knowledge work as a whole, if we were out in fields for most of the day and we're planting things and harvesting and like feeding animals and doing all this stuff, you don't really need gyms, do you? Like you're using your body all day long. But with knowledge work, if I'm just plugged in front of this, this 30-inch display for 10 hours and I'm talking in a microphone and I'm pushing pixels around, I better get up off my ass and go do a CrossFit class or something because my biology is going to fall apart. You know, the way we're wired, both from a mental health perspective and physically, like you have to compensate. And I think we're in this weird era right now. We're going to see more and more of AI just coming into people's both personal and professional lives. And there's going to have to be some sort of a counterbalance on the other side for the things that it's taking away from that human experience. And I wonder, as we talk about AI manifestos and change management and direction from leadership, like where that is going to fit in. Like, I really feel like there has to start to be some education about this. And maybe we can look at history as some powerful lessons that we don't want to repeat and have things like like we had these insane national obesity epidemics or diabetes or just all these things that came from a result of like, oh, now we're not using our bodies. CrossFit, Weight Watchers, right? Maybe we can get ahead of the curve this time. And I'm wondering if that's starting to come up.
So it
in-
is.
Okay.
The term that's coming up in HR circles is called pacing. And it's how do you communicate the appropriate cadence for outputs? You don't want to ever stifle people's creativity. And, if you're an engineer and you've just been uncorked to be able to like build everything, it's super exciting. And you're the guy who's running around with your thumb in your MacBook at lunch and you're using dispatch or you're using one of the remote control agents to like keep building things, but the organization actually can't deal with that because there are plenty of people in orbit around you that inherit that flow. And figuring out how that flow, even if individually you're creating burdens on yourself, like the first tier is the whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, there, Scooter, like slow down. The fire hose is not doing great for the rest of the team. So how do we pace that in a way that it makes sense versus our overall planning? And again, you don't want to stifle innovation, right? So we talk a lot about new capabilities with AI, and that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. It's like, oh, the engineer has a wild idea to create this new feature. Well, that wasn't in the roadmap anywhere, and you don't want to lose it because it is indeed a cool feature. But you can't just take the roadmap every single day or every Monday because the engineer spent all weekend like vibe coding and just like crumple up the roadmap and toss it again. There's discipline and there's attention to detail and there's quality control, code checks. Like there's a lot of like adulting that still has to be done in all of this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was thinking back to when there was such an emphasis on, and I feel like this is definitely people still talk about and there's still workshops, but it's a little passe, like this idea of company culture, right? And these human-centric companies where people are connecting with each other and the teams that are closest to each other are the most productive and it's better for the company. And so there was this real focus on that. And now it's AI, 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 right? And I feel like we might have a renaissance of this kind of human connection and company culture talk because I mean, listen, right now I'm building a mental health practice and objectively not a tech company, but very tech enabled, still very tech forward. I spent 25 years in tech. And when, I start thinking about how, I, I don't know, like I think it was a few episodes ago, I said, wow, I'm having dreams, like a lot of dreams of Claude right now. Like, well, because I'm like using it so much all day, every day. But then I had this thought of, well, now with dictation, right? I don't use my keyboard anymore. I'm just talking all day and I'm talking to this thing. And my brain probably thinks, oh, because I'm talking, I am like communicating with this other life or this other entity. And so now it's infiltrating my dreams. And it just keeps happening more and more. Like it really does. And so when I started to really zoom out and think about this, even though I'm not in an AI centric business, I spend way more time talking to and working with AI than I do other people right now. And is that the future of work? right? Is that the future of work? Is like more and more people do this? Is it going to be people in their little silos managing their suite of AI agents as opposed to all of that time before being spent connecting with other humans? So yeah, I've got a little bit of a theory about this, man. So
So okay, we debated between this episode about the Pope's encyclical,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
like okay, we're not that show, and like, but I think
yeah,
it's really interesting from like a closing slide perspective
yeah,
that the human centricity of how humans work is really really vital. And
yeah.
people are casting shade that the Pope didn't go too far, or that he had Anthropic there in the room, or whatever, or he's out of his lane. It's like his lane is humanity, and this is
The Pope is actually
exactly.
Dario wearing a mask.
Yeah, yeah, it's just Dario
That's the
wearing
big unveil. Yeah.
wearing the map. But like another piece of data that was floating around, I think I saw it in the Times over the weekend, that, or even yesterday, that it was somebody analyzed 375,000 college essays, and since the rise of GPT, and as you can imagine, the essays have definitely been infiltrated by AI. And what's happened is there's actually only one eighth the number of original ideas that are being put forward in those essays. And I think it's a super interesting data point that
Yeah.
to us really makes sense, because what are the models, right? The models are trained on existing information that's out there, and they are designed to basically find the best median piece of information that comes out the other direction. And students pushing themselves to come up with novel ideas to differentiate themselves from their peers, that's going away because people are leaning too much into the models.
Yep.
So beyond losing like just the human communication layer, you're just losing the spark of innovation. That the models of tomorrow need the innovation of today so they can subsume it and kill those jobs too. But that's like a different question. But our job as humans, our job as participants in an organization, are to come up with those new and novel ideas. So watch yourself. If you're
Yeah.
spending, I think it's different if you're like vibe coding your way through a project and you're trying to solve soluble problems. Like these are solved problems that you are stitching together. You're not adding new and different things. But if you are in that innovation room, if you are in that ideation room, yeah, okay, you can do some prep with the AI, but it's your synthesis that's going to add the new idea on top of it that's going to be valuable tomorrow.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. That's super interesting. And I think all of these skills will atrophy quickly when you just stop using them completely. And we're seeing that in education too, right? That's a big topic in education, as these things aren't just augmenting the things that we're actually practicing inside of education, but replacing them. Like if that's really the state of where all these different essays are right now, and they're all just being generated by LLMs, people will lose their ability to add anything new to the conversation. Like it will atrophy. It'll just start to disappear over time.
Okay, but this is important, because there are things that it's okay if they atrophy. It is okay if it goes away. Like the ability to use a slide rule. I have my grandfather's slide rule that
Sure.
sits as an artifact in my office. Zero idea how to use
It's
the
fine.
thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Absolutely doesn't matter. Like from an artisanal perspective, kind of cool. Like same thing with like a sextant.
Yeah.
Like you can choose to do these things, but like rote coding of like headers and these things fall
Or
into that category.
summarizing documents for the sake of summarizing them because somebody
Yeah.
asked for it and you're not interested in it, or like an insanely messy and deep inbox that it'll go and just pick out the important things you need to address. Great use cases, like absolutely great use cases.
But okay, here's an interesting one. So there's another piece of medical research. Again, this is fast and loose with the data because we're not a medical show and we can do that.
Yeah,
That someone had physicians in like an ENT specialty, so ear, nose, and throat, I think it was. Maybe I'm wrong. Use medical assisted interpretation of symptoms for only like 6 weeks. And they tested their ability to discern certain symptoms before and after. And they had a 3% degradation in their ability to recall those particular issues. So you got to ask yourself, okay, that is core to what this physician does as a ear, nose, and throat specialist, that
Right.
is what they do. But is it, if the tool is actually better and faster? Like,
Right.
I, I don't know. Is that a trade that's worth making? I would say no for
Yeah.
somebody who's junior, and it's probably okay for somebody who's senior,
Yeah, but
but
I
it's
mean, if
scary.
you look at it through the lens of their cognitive ability, right? Like this is what they're doing, and back to kind of the human element of this, and like losing those parts of your biology because they're being replaced. It's like the whole Google Maps debate, right? For hundreds of thousands of years, we had to know how to get places, right? We have to navigate around, and there's parts of your brain that are really good at doing that because that's how we survived as a species. It's one of the things that we needed to survive. It's like this is how I relate to things in my space and get around them and memorize routes and find my way, and this is safe and this isn't, right? I will turn on Google Maps for anything now, and I think they did a series of tests and kind of looked at cognitive prowess and people's ability to remember where to go and how to get places. And those places of the brain just kind of like had turned off over time when they stopped having to figure it out for themselves or learn it once and then repeat it. And instead just look at the little blue dot on the screen and just kind of blindly follow that. Right. So I think that's where it'll get interesting is if we start replacing those things that are really core to the human experience and not just augmenting them, but replacing them. Like I will say that Google Maps has replaced my need to ever figure out how to get somewhere. And it doesn't matter if I'm in a car, a mountain bike, hiking, like I'm just looking at a map. I'm looking at a little GPS thing on my watch or my phone or on my car screen. And so some of that I think has to be considered. And what you're talking about too with some of these other points, I think are super super valid. But if you go a layer below that, right? If you really look at kind of the first principles of this stuff and you go back 300,000 years in time, this connection with each other, like people talking to people and forming these bonds, that meant survival, right? Like the lonely human got eaten. There was no lone wolf. The connected person got fed, protected, passed on their genes. So your nervous system actually learned to treat belonging as a matter of life and death because it was, right? And so if any of these chats can mimic the conversation part of it, it still can't mimic the tribe part that kept you alive. And so your nervous system doesn't know it's 2026. It's still running software from the savannah where, isolation was a death sentence and connection was a whole strategy for survival. And so, that's why loneliness hurts. Like that's why the Surgeon General declared it a national epidemic that was more harmful than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, right? It's an alarm. So I think the fundamental problem might be that the chat can quiet the alarm, but it's never delivering the actual safety that the alarm was built to find, right? So I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about that part as AI infiltrates my dreams. As I spend more time in isolation talking to it, that we didn't survive because we were strong. We survived because we banded together. We co-regulated, we shared risk. Faces would register our distress and, would move towards it. And, AI can simulate being seen, but your body knows the difference. Like at a deep biological level, it knows the difference between a mirror and like a real witness. And only one of those actually helps you thrive. So um, I think that there are just going to be more and more impacts. Like when I talk to these people, right, that are just so immersed in this stuff, and they're talking to AI way more than humans, as I fell into for many, many months, if not years now. I'm wondering about the secondary effects that that's having and when that's going to be recognized as a problem in the workplace as well.
Okay, so oversharing just a bit, but my wife, I had to have a bit of an intervention with her this weekend
Okay.
over her use of Chatty. She calls ChatGPT.
Okay.
And one of we have a high school junior who's like looking for schools, and I could just feel that she'd fallen into like a self-reinforcing loop, and I had to be like, hey, okay, you need to back out of the loop that you're in,
Yeah.
and you need to ask it these gut check type questions to recenter. And highly skilled, highly educated, but super easy to see how that spiral happens. So to bring us a little bit back on track here as AI at work, what are the things that we should be solving with AI? I think that a lot of the last few minutes has been about that maintaining that human intuition and that human differentiation that kind of
And
sits at
human connection.
that human connection.
Don't let it replace human connection,
Don't let it replace human connection.
because
And
we're wired for it, and it's gonna mess you up, and it'll mess up your corporate culture as well if you just like throw everybody into these isolated silos with agents.
just think
I
about it right now.
guarantee it. I guarantee it.
If you're in whatever market and you have 10 competitors in that market and everybody is just sort of using AI, like it's all kind of tossing out the same ideas, at some point you don't deserve to exist because you're not doing anything that's more differentiated than your neighbor. And that's what's always driven business forward. So I would say, things not to automate are some of those innovation pieces. Doesn't mean you can't amplify them, but how about things that should be applied to AI? I think it comes back sort of to the slide rule, but like what are the things that if you were looking at an organization, would you immediately pinpoint?
Me personally,
Yeah, you personally, because
me pers-
this is basically what I do.
yeah.
I'm curious on your take.
Yeah. I would say anything that is really like a mundane pushing around of pixels, I would replace as soon as possible. And I think that the trap that I fall into is, and I think I've been speaking to a lot of people falling into this trap. Like when we talk about like, what are those use cases? I would say that because there are so many features dropping so fast, and because these models are playing leapfrog with each other so quickly, and the iterations happen so fast and releases happen so fast, that very often with the people I've been talking to, AI has become this solution that's looking for a problem, as opposed to the question you're asking of what are the specific use cases where you can drop it in and, have it get have it take away the things that are keeping you from doing the real work that not only matters, but that you love to do, that you enjoy doing, right? I hate email. I've hated email since email started. Like it's this burden to keep up on. The only thing I hate more than email is real-time chats, great. Now we have Slack, but the email didn't go away. I've got Slack too, right? My calendar, and I've got my calendar too. I've got to keep. Oh boy, when is this appointment? And oh, when can you make time? Things like tools like Calendly. Right now, there's a million different Calendlys. Kind of took away that whole process we'd have to go through of, well, when are you free? Well, when's Mike free? When's Bob free? And it kind of solved that part of it, right? Less time staring at the screen, just figure out something mundane that felt ridiculous. My to-do list, right? The decision fatigue of what is most important. How do I tag this? How do I organize it? I don't know. I don't know. Like probably most people don't have like over 100 things on their to-do list. I'm guessing you do, Kevin, because we're probably wired similarly. But that's exhausting too. So all of those things I have really just handed over to AI, to what we're calling our chief of staff or a mono thread or whatever you want to call it, but basically a singular chat that's connected to all these different endpoints so that I can just go to one place and make decisions in a single chat that would have ordinarily, I would have had to just round robin a dozen different applications to figure this all out. So that I think anything, ironically enough, whatever is happening on the screen that I can leverage to have me spend less time on the screen in aggregate, I think is a good use case. The part I was just emphasizing is where it gets dangerous is you can just keep running that direction and it really does turn into, now I have a bunch of solutions and I'm looking for problems, right? And those problems often aren't worth fixing, or you're almost inventing new problems to fix because you have a solution. And that's where the AI work density trap tends to fall in. That's where the FOMO falls in. That's where you start dropping off human connection because you're spending all your time doing this, as I have been for many months now, and I'm trying to wean off of it and really surgically look at this stuff of what is the most important thing to solve here that's going to make my work and my life better, right?
Uh, Interesting.
I got one more quick one for you that I love that was like, drove me absolutely crazy was I would, be on Instagram wasting my life trying to just find some recipes. Like, this is the family thing every Sunday. What are we going to eat this week? We got to plan our meals for all the kids. And it's such a headache. So I'd go to Instagram and I'd save recipes. But then once I have the recipes, it's like ingredients in the captions. Well, God damn it, Meta, you can't copy and paste captions. Oh, but there's this free web-based tool that will extract the captions from Instagram. Okay, so now I got to use web-based Instagram, which is horrible. And I paste a link in and I do this. I'm like, you know what? it's going to build an agent to do this all for me, right? So it would every week just kind of go to my Instagram feed and it would pull all those recipes out. It would use the tool to extract all the captions and then build out a recipe listing, ClickUp, and then just give me my goddamn meal plan every Sunday night, right? Tons of time saved, decision fatigue, all that stuff. I now got these cool high protein meals that are delicious, and it's got all the steps and recipes in a print friendly version. Amazing, amazing, right? Less time on the computer, more time just eating with my family.
So, okay, this is, I feel like you sort of just played right into my, not trap, but
We
it's,
didn't script this.
we didn't script this at all. But like, that is the most pedestrian stuff ever that you
Yeah,
just described. You are not, even as a CEO, even as somebody who's leading companies, like you weren't necessarily spending all of this effort on reinventing your company. And not that you weren't thinking about it, and not that you weren't noodling forward on it, and not that you didn't have people that are doing it, but most organizations are sort of missing this part.
yeah.
So now go to an organization that has 1,000 people. And it's like you go to that division head or whatever, and they'll pontificate on like whatever, new thing that they want to do to increase sales or whatever it is. But they actually haven't enabled their people to deal with all of this other pedestrian stuff because they haven't isolated like a platform or an approach or have a policy or whatever it is, such that everybody in the organization can start ticking these things off one at a time. And it doesn't feel like much to be like, oh, well, we're going to save a couple hours on, whatever that meeting follow up is, until you multiply it by 1,000 people in
That
the
math adds up
organization.
fast, right?
And this also plays into, oh my goodness, I'm actually going to get to one of my other talking points that I didn't think so, is as far as having a standard like set of tools that you go to. You can't necessarily just have people solving all of their problems in all of these different ways, particularly when you start talking about agents and vibe coding and whatever.
Especially if they're organization problems, not individual problems,
Yeah,
right?
that
You got to be able
they're
to share this stuff.
so having like a core set of technologies that all roads kind of lead back to is really, really important. And not enough organizations are doing that. In big organizations, you might have things like Workday, and sort of like we guys like us can sneer at things like that, but it's already integrated all over the place.
Yeah.
But people still don't know how to use it to amplify whatever they're doing. But smaller organizations leaning into a platform, all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, understanding what it can and can't do, giving people access to the right tools to make these things happen, and then encouraging them to go out and solve some of their own problems. That is where a lot of the immediate gains are. And I know that's not like super popular, particularly at enterprise. Well, individual efficiency isn't really worth investing in. Well, times thousands of people it is. And what are those people? Where is that intellect? Where is that humanity going to be focused when they're not focused on TPS reports?
Totally, totally. I mean, that kind of goes back to the whole like, for a very long time, it was all about productivity and individual wellness wasn't worth investing in. And then they realized, oh, wait, all of a sudden, yes, it is. Because mentally well people, happy people are more productive, right? People who connect with other people are more productive. And people who waste 3 hours a day just bouncing in and out of their inbox and trying to sync that with their calendar or their to do list also are much less productive, right? And so, yeah, there's no. I think to your point, Kevin, there's no universal playbook for this stuff of like, here's how you do it. This is what everybody should be doing. It really does, at least at this time right now, come down to, well, okay, what are the tools that you have available? And what are other people doing? How can we replicate that across an organization so that everybody shares in the benefit of these few outlier individuals who have kind of found this Uber hack to get back 3 hours of their day?
I would say that part of it is tracking and acknowledgement, that it doesn't really exist right now in a structured way in most organizations. So we do this pretty cool thing in our scaled trainings where every interaction we have, every lecture we do, we're always recording with permission, of course, but we're taking all of those different ideas that people have and we're putting them into a sandbox. And then as people complete projects, because that's sort of the goal of the program, is that you complete a practical project at the end, that goes into an organizational database that the tech team can see and they can prioritize based on ROI. or whatever it may be, but you don't lose it. If you don't capture it,
Yeah.
you'll lose it. And that's it's true of any meeting that we have. Why do we have meetings? We have meetings to exchange information, and we sit
Right.
there with our notepads and we scribble things
Right.
down. Okay, now we're transcribing meetings. Great. So now we can capture more of that. But are we capturing all of the grist there? Are we capturing all of the opportunities? In fact, I can't really I can think of one that I work with that's doing a good job of actually capturing
Isn't
all
it
of
isn't
that
it isn't
nuance.
it funny that this kind of used to be the promise of CRMs, right? But the problem was that nobody took the time to get the data into the CRM. So the CRMs were just this shell of missed data opportunities. At least in, I mean, I worked in half a dozen corporate organizations in the sales part of the business units where, it'd be like, oh, this client came back and they're interested in X. Like, let's go into the notes. Oh, there are no notes. Like, well, did anybody ever call them? I don't know, because all the call logs are empty, right? Like, it was just like this empty feed inside of Salesforce or half a dozen other CRMs I worked in. So I think what I'm hearing a lot of out there right now is even if you aren't really sure of what technology you're going to settle on, how you're going to use that technology, how it's going to connect all the pieces, there really should be an early emphasis on how do you capture the conversations, the data points, the ideas, and start to build this out so that when that time does come, you can start to connect all those dots and you aren't starting from scratch. You can make sense of the things that you've already captured, right? And this is everything from the AI note takers to the dictation tools that we use all day, on and on, right? Just how do you start to at least get these into one place so that, because I'm not really convinced, Kevin, that there is, it sounds like, you implemented a pretty cool workflow where these then get presented back to people. I'm seeing right now in that middle part of it, like tons and tons of data coming in and then lots of noise being outputted and then nobody really knowing what to do with all that noise. Like, who's going to take the time to read it or really implement the good ideas, put out the bad ideas, share the ones across different business units that are really going to move the needle. Like, I feel like we're in the frontier, kind of pioneer days of that part of it. But as far as like getting to the point where you can at least start to collect all these things that have historically been lost, you can now kind of do that in a passive way instead of like actively typing notes into Salesforce, right?
It's not that easy though. So I think we have 10 different projects going on right now with different clients that are something along this line. This like, oh, we have data over here and we have data here and there's transcripts and then what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
And like like as much as we all want to just toss it in a giant spaghetti bowl and say pick at it, well, that's really expensive. You can actually do that, but it's really really expensive. So being able to gather the data from the right places of the organization, convert the data to something that's usable through, using vector structures, so RAG and
Yeah.
structures like that, and then figuring out how you make it assailable to people. This is a huge, huge, huge deal. And
I think it's that last part that's the biggest challenge, to be honest.
it,
Because those other parts are solved. I mean, they may not be easy or economical right now, but a lot of them are they're solved and they're evolving, but there's something there. It's that getting it back in front of people, like what do you do with all of that? How do you then use it to drive strategic decisions in the organization? That part is tough. Like that part is tough.
So there was I listened to the All In podcast and they had Mark Benioff,
How dare you?
CEO of
Okay.
Salesforce. I don't listen to it that often. Actually, somebody told me I should listen to it because I've been going off about headless software, and
Yeah.
they let him go on a little bit about the future of Salesforce. And what I took away from it was the future of Salesforce is Slack. So Salesforce owns Slack, and Slack is this core of all of these company communication, and it's starting to proactively surface things in really really interesting ways. So not in a way that you or I have to go in and like figure out all the logic and like pull out the prompts and figure out where the data structures are. It's already baked into Slack. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty gangster move by Salesforce, which moves them very rapidly out of the CRM, the sales business,
Yeah.
and into like the enterprise spine business. And I think I just convinced myself that I should buy some Salesforce. It's like way down because they're really well positioned. And although I don't love Salesforce, like they're really, really well positioned as far as having the right channels of data communication. And it's just a matter of connecting a few more into the harnesses. I think
Right.
for mere mortal companies, like where their CRM is sort of an adjacency, it's not going to be quite the same. And you're going to see those companies leaning more into the frontier models. So
Yeah.
OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, et cetera. And these things will just start surfacing in a way that right now it's like brute force, expensive, complicated type effort. And, in a year, it might be you just open your Gemini and it's already crawled the things that it thinks it needs to crawl.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So for those of you that Kevin just completely lost right now, think about
Usually your job.
that day when you opened up Gmail and at the top of your inbox it said, "Hey, you sent this email to this dude 6 days ago and he never replied. Do you want to follow up?" Right? Like there was this low level intelligence on the back end there that knew you sent the email. It knew you never got a reply. And so it brought it back to your attention without you asking. And it's like, those are the capabilities that we're starting to see in Slack right now, where it's connecting dots on the back end because it is now under the Salesforce suite. It has access to a bunch more data points. And that becomes a useful thing that's operating in the place that people are already used to going to have these communications. So that is, yeah. Back to like what's really useful, right? Like that's very useful, and we're seeing just the beginning time of it. Kevin, I've got a few more minutes, man. I don't know if you really want to press on keeping this right at an hour, which I'm fine to, but if you want to talk about some of these Claude skills, I did have a couple thoughts on it that we could wrap in 10 minutes, and I'm happy to do it. It's up to you.
I think we should do that next week. We could do.
Okay. Oh,
we
next
could
week. Okay.
we could do Claude skills next week. The other thing,
I got thoughts on Claude skills.
you got thoughts. Yeah. There's also the tech stack. These are really important pieces that are building blocks. And there is so much that's just going on in so many directions. It is super exciting, but it is starting to mature. Like I'm feeling it. It's starting to mature, and it's becoming much more accessible to people day by.
Just don't let it make you lonely, Kevin.
Yeah.
Don't let it make you lonely.
Lose my wife to chatty.
Talk to humans.
All right, man.
All right, bud. See ya.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to send us a question to answer on the show, email me at elijah@spark6.com. That is SPARK, the number 6.com, or Kevin@ascendlabs.ai. To learn more about AI strategy and training for your business, visit Kevin's company, Ascend AI Labs, at ascendlabs.ai. And to learn more about design and development of custom AI solutions, visit my agency at spark6.com. You can also sign up for my free newsletter, AI Framework Friday, by visiting spark6.com/newsletter.